of Aram and Manthan, where for the first day we had the founding members of the Board of Studies of Department of Design, SPA Bhopal, as our guests of honor with us. For the second day, we had presentations and panel discussion by 4 young designers on the theme Designing for the Future. And today, we have with us 3 prominent design educators. We have Professor Pradeep Yammiyawar from this Department of Design, IIT Guwahati. We have Dr. Shilpa Das from NID Ahmedabad and Dr. Deepa Butoliya from Stamp School of Art and Design, University of Michigan. Now, I would like to introduce our first guest of the evening. Professor Pradeep Yammiyawar has made remarkable contributions in the Indian design education for 34 years, initiating design schools at IISc Bangalore and IIT Guwahati. He established India's pioneering usability interaction design HCI lab at IIT Guwahati and launched India's first formal PhD program in design. The Government of India has conferred him with a national award for teaching innovations and contributions to design education. We have been very fortunate to have had a few insightful interactions with Professor before today. So now I would request Professor Yammiyawar to kindly take over.
Thank you, Rick Bhattacharjee. I will now share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Not yet, sir. Not yet, sir.
Okay. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. Now we can see it.
Okay. Is it full screen now? Is it full screen?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this feedback about online presentations itself is one of the issues that is now bugging everybody all over the world. And you know, how nice to start a presentation with a problem where designers have an opportunity. All it requires is a feedback as to, you know, on my screen, whether the screen is on there or not, even by simple words. Anyway, so good afternoon, everybody. And I'm going to present today some opportunities for designers that Industry 4 is likely to open up for us. I have been interacting with the students of SPA and I have seen their work, though I have not gone into details of their graphic design part because I am an interaction designer and I'm quite familiar with their work and they are up to date. Now, are we really up to date for tomorrow? That is the question that I am trying to address here. What is this Industry 4? Industry 4 actually builds upon data models and data mapping across end-to-end product life cycles and manufacturing and all the other associated systems. So most often it's called cyber physical systems. Now, where has this come from? See, this is the 4th industrial revolution. By the way, that 4 is 4th industrial revolution. The first one was steam and water, as we know. Before that, there were horses and animals that were powering our industry. The second one happened when electricity was discovered and it was magic. And through wires, you could send power. It changed the entire size of the machinery. It changed where we could set up factories and it changed several things. Electricity generation stations came about. The third revolution happened and when electronics came in a very big way. From electrical to electronics is a big jump, and automation is the word used to indicate the change in technology. So electronics opened up something that human beings never dreamt of, including the internet. Now we are in the fourth industrial revolution. That is a cyber physical system, as what they call. And you are all familiar with driverless cars, Tesla, and smart materials, so on and so forth. This is already part of the fourth industrial revolution. We are already in it. So actually, how does this fourth industrial revolution look inside from a factory? I'll just quickly show you. Oh, just a moment. I'll try to run a video. So what did we see in the video? We saw only machines working. We could not find a single human being on the floor. So actually, this is a video of in a German plant, Mercedes-Benz. And what is interesting about this is that the entire factory is connected to the entire system. Like if the rate of sales of the car indicates low, here the machines themselves produce lesser numbers because there is a problem of inventory, problem of storage of mass-produced products. This is just a glimpse of what Industry 4 is. Though this is an automobile industry, industries such as mobiles are so small and compact that they can be simply packed up in a ship container, sent across anywhere in the world and set up in a matter of weeks. And they do not require any human intervention till at the final stages of assembly. So these connected environments of data, people, process, service, systems is what Industry 4 is all about. And this includes IoT. So some of the common influential technology platforms as a result of this fourth industrial revolution are advanced robotics and automation, artificial intelligence and machine learning, cloud computing, Internet of Things or connected devices, smart and real-time data sensors. You must have heard about smart cities and smart transportation, so on and so forth. 3D printing, of course, all of you are fully aware of. So you see, the building blocks of Industry 4 are smart machines, storage systems, clouds, and networks, and so on and so forth. So someone has to design all these into place, and someone is doing it. But then, is Industry 4 what we just saw? Is it all about only connecting and technology and sending information between machines? All are familiar with this rapid prototyping, 3D prototyping. This is right across in at our doorstep. You see, most labs have it. I'm sure your lab also may have one. It is now a household hobby. So with 3D printers, design skills in model making, rendering, they are not critical anymore for the employers. Now, that doesn't mean those skills are redundant. No. The knowledge behind those skills are still important. Only knowledge of these skills gets shifted elsewhere when people find need for designers. But before we go into opportunities, let us look at some of the areas that are opening up because of this Industry 4.0. These terms, AI, IoT, Internet of Things, actually IoT, deep learning, big data, analytics, why are they suddenly becoming important to designers? If someone says that they are not becoming important as designers, soon when all of you step into the industry, you'll start hearing these. And by the way, just because I am speaking about it as an interaction designer, this is not the only scenario in the world outside. Conventional design disciplines like graphic design, filmmaking, animation, all of them also have equal opportunities. But those opportunities are also changing with the changing scenario in Industry 4.0. Now, you have heard about AI. If you look at artificial intelligence, actually it's a very large field. Thousands and thousands of scientists and engineers and researchers are working in this. And artificial intelligence actually has smaller subsections like machine learning, natural language processing, speech systems, imaging systems, and they are further used for clustering, software engineers writing algorithms, and so on and so forth. Now, most of the material that's available on the net or the experts we tend to meet give the view of artificial intelligence as what you're seeing on the screen. This has got nothing to do with design as what we know or what we have trained for. But is this a correct statement I am making? Let's go a little deeper into Industry 4. Internet of Things and Services, IoT. What is it? You see, industry is, as you have seen in the video and the previous few slides, it's well knit, already ready. Similarly, smart buildings, smart houses, smart projects, and smart cities are coming up. That means they're all interconnected buildings, interconnected water services, interconnected electricity. Similarly, healthcare, smartphones, all of you have smartphones. Smart mobility is coming up now. Smart grids in electrical supplies, they are coming up. This has necessitated a complete change in how humans interact with machines. The Industry 4 revolution and in artificial intelligence and software, all these disciplines or areas contribute to what is called machine-to-machine communications through the internet. That's fine. Experts are working on it. But what is not much discussed or said is the communication between humans and these systems, humans and these machines involved in it. That is where this human and computer interaction, HCI, as term which you know already as a designer, comes in and fits in and links you to Industry 4. One thing that we need to know from the design point of view or designer's point of view is that the technology actually is the easy part. The hard part is figuring out the social and institutional structures around the technology. You see, if machines are talking to machines in Industry 4, experts who know machines can make two machines friendly or work together. But when human beings in a smart building or electric grid come up, or smart mobility come up, or healthcare come up, then it becomes a completely messy affair. What seems to be, Industry 4 potential economics, great change, suddenly seems to have trouble in understanding the concept as a whole and applying it. Why is that so? See, there are two types of intelligences in Industry 4, in even artificial intelligence. There is a human intelligence and there is a machine intelligence. Designers must be concerned with human intelligence. Human intelligence are actually, this is still evolving and there could be many sub-classifications here, but mainly it is contextual intelligence involving the mind, meaning spatial, where I am, what I am doing, what I am aware of. And I keep changing my decision. If I am in a street, I change a different, my entire action would be different from when I'm sitting in a class. So then there is an emotional intelligence. It involves the heart. Everybody knows about emotional intelligence. Then there is something called inspired intelligence, the soul. It is human beings are very curious, creative individuals by birth. They want to know why, what is it, and final question is, what is God, who am I, why I'm here, and so on and so forth. So this is inspired intelligence. Then there is physical intelligence. By physical intelligence, we mean the intelligence that is vested in the human body, kinesthetic intelligence. Our bodies are very, very intelligent, and they sense, not just 5 senses. The entire body senses. The entire body knows lots of things that it communicates to the parasympathetic system. Now, the good part for a designer is that these human intelligences, these are beyond technology as of now. They're very difficult to transfer and make them part of technology, because they come and originate from the human being, who is perfect machines. So this area where human intelligence is there is the area where designers have opportunities. Artificial intelligence is not new at all, even if I heard it last year or the year before. It's in 1956, where many of us of our generation were just born, or in your generation or not born. It's history for you all. So Herbert Simon was one of the co-founders. Herbert Simon's name is associated with design because he suggested, saying designers should follow what is called as artificial sciences, as against natural sciences like chemistry, physics, biology, followed by scientists. So he is the one who laid the first foundations for design, and he is also the one who was a founding member of artificial intelligence. That is the deep connection of designers to artificial intelligence. So in short, what is this? Artificial intelligence is the ability of a machine to perform tasks normally requiring human intelligence. You see, wrongly people think that artificial intelligence scientists are trying to make machines like humans. No, it is making machines take on tasks that normally require human intelligence to do. So artificial intelligence has many deeper specialization subjects which we should be familiar with. That's all. See, in machine learning, there's something called deep learning and predictive analytics. This predictive analytics is what is of importance to designers, because we'll see in the next slides how predictive analytics is very helpful. Text to speech, this, of course, you are using it almost every day in your mobile phones. Image recognition is another one that is connected and of interest to the designers. Language, for example, expert systems, management systems. These are a few of the areas where designers directly find applications. So AI, in short, to understand it easily from the designer's point of view, it is duplicating the human mind, and with it, along with it, all these things associated. Now, it's not all so nice and groovy. Despite all the advances in AI still cannot solve simple mathematical questions. And leave alone things like emotions, intelligence, human intelligence, sensing, or human thinking, or creative thinking. So it is, absolute need for this human-centered intelligence that opens opportunities for creative designers to make their presence felt. If design schools have not started, they need to start now. So we at IIT, we knew about these things, and we have started slowly working towards some research projects, which you will see in the presentation later. Now, I was talking about AI and I was talking about human intelligence. Here is a paper cutting. It says that these workers here sitting on the screens, they are neither doctors nor they are any highly qualified. They are graduates. What are they doing? They are trying to isolate cancer-causing polyps in colon from X-rays. They are basically doing medical transcription, which is the first level work to be done in artificial intelligence. They are isolating it such that they want to teach a machine, an MRI probably machine, to detect the polyp, cancer-causing polyp. Now, you see, a polyp that is benign and a polyp that is malignant is almost same. Only a very trained physician or a doctor knows it out of experience. Now, but these trainees are trained very well, and they are quite successful. in doing it. 90% of the basic work in artificial intelligence starts here. So I'm just showing this to tell you how human intelligence cannot be, the human eye that can detect that cannot be overlooked. And this is what designers should understand. Actually, the future, it is not the computing or software or other areas in AI. It is the human factor that's going to be useful. Take, for example, dating apps. We are all good at creating apps and so on and so forth. But somebody like us, a set of designers, created a dating app. I won't name the app, but then one becomes tender while using it, and you keep on searching for something, and it finally becomes game. Nobody's satisfied with it. So now the developers of this app are saying we have to use artificial intelligence to make a group of people interested in other people come together, not by chance or not by swiping left and right, but by linking them below. So they are talking of deep nets. Now, AI also has other issues. For example, Amazon used AI to scrutinize 20 to 30,000 applications in the beginning. And they trained it by using all the applications that they received for jobs. What the AI did was it learned. And soon when they started using that AI to scrutinize more applications, somebody found out that there were women being rejected. Most human applications were being rejected. And by the time they realized it, it was quite late, and then lawsuits and all that, and then gender bias came in. So now they went back and found out that the basic data they used to train that AI came from mainly male applicants, and that's how the AI learned. So this is where designers have an opportunity. Of course, in day-to-day life, for example, power dressing, how nice it would be for your mobile to tell you that today you please wear that blue shirt and red because so and so and so and so, and it tells your artificial intelligence that you are likely to meet Alexa on the road, and today somebody is not coming to college and so on and so forth, or today the climate is so bad. So people are looking for it. So it's a question of quantitative data and qualitative data. Designers' role is for increasing trust, and interpreting qualitative data is going to be very important. So we all know that in design we have social dimension, science dimension, philosophical dimension, and technological dimensions. And this space, the social space, which is what designers work in, this space is to be mapped on one side, the human brain, like I just said, intelligence, through perception, cognition, emotion, and reaction, and on the other side, into artificial intelligence, function, architecture, data structures. And this mapping can only be done by a designer. So I am telling and discussing all this because, just don't go by what is said about artificial intelligence and the new knowledge that is coming in. And this is what I argued in a meeting in Niti Aayog, saying while one should put in a lot of money in research into computer science and other subjects, equal amount of money must go into design and to train AI specialists. So this emergence of new discipline, we have already been doing it at IIT, and we set up this system, this laboratory long back. And a few of the things that if I have time, I will show you, and I'll skip some of the things. Here is one of the first one. See, this, everybody designs app, but here what we did was we used gamification. Many designers don't use gamifications to its maximum extent, but here we use the gamification in a very positive social way. This was about teaching girls in a rural area about menstrual hygiene, and this is a very taboo topic. How do we bring it together? How do we we made it into a game where only the concerned girls are involved, and as a result of winning the game, they get free internet, or they get free supply of pads to their village as a whole. And then somebody said, why not make two villages compete with each other? So then that's why the IoT and other things started coming in. So a designer with this creativity can really start exploiting what technology has to offer today. If we can only simply bridge these gaps, we will be happy. Things like educational technology, all what is online thing happening today, virtual reality, augmented reality. So these are some of the areas that are going to be very useful. This, for example, India is very known for its textiles. And in textile design, it's not just style and fashion. It's also about social, society. Two women wearing Kanjivaram sari on the street actually carry a lot of history and tradition along with the Kanjivaram sari. So one of our designers doing PhD thought, why not we connect all these Kanjivaram saris and try and know what is happening in this country. So see, this is where the new thinking is required. And 3D interfaces for virtual reality is another one. I think I'll run, I have about 10 minutes more, I suppose. And I will quickly run this part of the video for a short period and move through.
Despite technological advancements, soon it would be difficult to differentiate between physical and virtual world. It's imperative to design interactions in this virtual reality to closely resemble that in physical reality. Numerous interaction techniques have been proposed for virtual reality, each with its own pros and cons. These methods have evolved from tangible buttons and joysticks to intangible keys and gestures. But intensive research and experimentation, interactions on 2D GUIs have been constitutionalized. These have even formed the basis for 3D interactions as well. However, these interactions fail to address problems that are essential to maintain users. UENCI Lab has taken us to reality environment. They have been exploring input modalities like case pointing and hand presence in a virtual reality environment in various scenarios. As a part of our initial exploration, we conducted a comparative study by using the keypad inspired from the Yammiyawar. The design was similar to, which is spatially arranged in a random order in VR environment. Pointing a key using case pointed and caps in each position was an easier interface for task preparation. Despite some our findings in studies, we set out in India. So, we conceptualized another prototype for an online money transaction scenario with gestures and interaction modality. It takes the mode of payment. Menu items appear as ribbons or fingertips. Selection is made using a pitch gesture followed by a feedback sound. In the second part, the user selects a credit card arranged in a curved rectangular arrangement. Cards are labeled 1 to 6 and a card is selected by extending the corresponding number of fingers followed by a feedback. Users should have preference towards gestures.
So what we saw in the previous video was an attempt to create new interfaces, not 2D GUIs, but interfaces for the virtual world. And fundamental questions keep coming up, which you see no other professional rather than a designer can answer these research questions. So there is a lot to work on research also in this area in a fundamental way. Here is another video which shows IoT. So now you see in this particular video clip on students working in electronics laboratory, we were trying to find out how best we can make use of these technologies and create an app which could be self-learning to each group of students and later on connect all labs across the country. Actually, this work won many awards and it won quite a lot of interest amongst others who want to develop such educational systems with, for laboratory teaching. So the fields of data science, for example, predictive analytics is another area where branding, marketing, consumer behavior, choices, simple thing like which shampoo graphic will work. One can easily predict based on what will work and what not work. And now in organizations are asking designers to use data given to them to predict and say this, rather than go for very expensive service. So new roles for UX UI designers are constantly coming up. And the one question that keeps on being asked even by our students is, should designers now also study coding and programming? How can we do that? You see, it is good to know. If you can master it, then it will be very good. But it is not necessary. When we say master, it's not necessary to become an expert. Actually, this simple Excel tricks, if you know, even those will be very useful in understanding these concepts, and talk to your colleagues who want you to contribute to their decision making from other departments like marketing and others. So skill sets of designers concerning human aspects will dominate all jobs now. This is what is happening currently. If you go to the net on Twitter and other places, you will see a lot of discussion on something called full stack developer. So I'm quoting here one author, Nishita Abraham, saying, who is this full stack developer? A technical person who is a know-all, has a wealth of information and experience in handling all technologies required in software application development. So, and he's known as a rock star. But then questions arise. If a full stack developer is to do design, UI, UX, analytics, development, such a person is impossible to get. But there are who has a chance of learning a little bit of all others and be a master of at least one. Actually, it is the designer. It is very difficult for a software engineer or an engineer to understand all the things that designers do and how they do it. So actually, it is not a versus this. The question should not be, should we learn or not? Yes, you should learn, because knowing the theory is much better than trying to master all this PHP, C, and CSS. You need not. If you can, well and good. But if you cannot, then you at least should know these terms. You should know why the other counterparts, the developers, are using it. What do they want? When they say we want it this way, then you have to understand, because you insist that data visualization should be this way. And so therefore this give and take has to happen. For that, you have to know all these things, at least at the surface level, at least, so that it is actually UI plus all these for, say, a web development. So this stack keeps changing according to the area of specialization you want. So navigating the next industrial revolution would, for a designer, mean how best they can cope with complex systems and their structures. This is all a game about complexity. So designers have to master complex systems. For this, system analysis and information design is critical. You have to learn that. I'm sure you have done it. Actually, most of you have shown information architecture diagrams, hierarchy tables. That's just the beginning. Go deep into it, and then you will slowly start liking it and realizing it is not very difficult at all. So design thinking to solve wicked problems is to be mastered from your end, but in the IoT and AI systems. So the government of India actually has already started. AICT and others are developing this skill development for Industry 4 already, and they are talking about this. And there are a lot of Industry 4 workshops happening. And big data analytics market is valued at 12,000 or 13,000 crores, because our population is large and we are good in software. So actually, one of the reports says that India is to add 14 lakh jobs. And you see, that's where opportunities are there for designers. What awaits us tomorrow? VR, IoT, and of course, we have more number of Alexas or Meenakshis, if you like them. We should have an Indian Meenakshi also competing with Alexa. And we are already there. You are already using many of these things yourself. So here is another video, very quick, short one.
high transmission range. Extracted data is then informative for this officer on the crowd's desktop application. He then sends his alerts and instructions to employees the crowd to be based on the predictions shown in the application. The outpost reacts to the feedback that is given.
Yeah, so I have to cut short the video, but then you see in this video you see that wearable devices and crowd behavior. Now crowd behavior, if a religious crowd keeps moving, chanting God's name Vitala Vitala and moves, one can easily predict that they are more orderly. But if there's something else wrong by the as indicated by their headbands or wristbands, one could immediately predict and inform and predict the possibility of that particular group in the crowd leading to a stampede. So it is such areas where designers can find a lot of opportunities. And see, finding opportunities means you have to create your opportunities. You have all the ingredients with you already. You don't require anything more. You don't require to master every damn programming language or new thing that's coming up. But you have to understand all of them, of course. So here is another one. You see here there are chemical plants, and these chemical plants are having large screens, control rooms where very complex machinery is managed and controlled. One mistake between the two and then the whole plant can blow off. And same thing with like in an airport ATC. Now these are now rapidly changing in Industry 4. Now they also want the screens and the way they control to be changed. Now this is where designers can do wonders, like creating VR simulations and then superimposing these simulations with actual real-time data that's happening, and make human error very less. And there is always scope for such new products, and designers the opportunities for designers is endless actually. So this is just a glimpse of what is likely to happen. Designers have to invest in relearning, retraining to take on the future. Actually, tomorrow morning is the future. Monday, 20th July, the future is already here. It is for you to open the doors and connect those things that the world doesn't see. To do that, what we have found at IIT Guwahati is that designers need to reorient themselves towards spending time or their emphasis. See, the question is what to learn, what to leave, where to go. We can't every day morning learn a new program. No, you don't have to. See, the computational processing knowledge base, we are talking about processing knowledge base, which is different from the engineering knowledge base. Then the cognitive processing knowledge base, the information systems, designers are quite familiar with this. Even when you're 2 years program, you are quite familiar with these terms. Then HCI processing knowledge base, so usability engineering, human computer interaction, and these aspects. And of course the designers main weapon, conceptualizing, synthesizing process. So unfortunately what happens is we tend to look at the whole world with designers say we want 100%, we will do only these. Fine, you're good at it, that is where you're masters, but then you have to also strengthen yourselves into These three areas is what it comes down to. So with this, I conclude my presentation, and I am ready to have any questions that may come up. And I leave you with a scene which is IIT Guwahati Lake. And this is, if you, many of you have visited, I think this batch has visited, but those of you who have not visited should come along. It's a nature's paradise. It's very beautiful here. So now I will put off the screen, okay, and I will, stop sharing the screen. Yeah. So was it technically okay?
Yes, sir, it was. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
I'm sure we all have a lot to reflect upon to keep ourselves updated for Industry 4.0. I would like to remind our viewers to kindly give their questions, put their questions in the comment section, and then we'll take it up in the Q&A session. Now, we proceed to our next guest, Dr. Shilpa Das. Dr. Shilpa Das is Principal Faculty in Interdisciplinary Design Studies and Head of PhD Program at NID. She has cumulative work experience of 26 years in academics, publishing, and voluntary sectors. She works actively in the area of women's sexual and reproductive health and disability. She is the editor, author, and creative visualizer of the book 50 Years of the National Institute of Design, 1961 to 2011, and co-editor of the book Indian Crafts in a Globalizing World. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. The faculty at SPA, students, graduating students, and also thank you for the invitation. So let me start by sharing my presentation. Just give me a moment. Is the screen shared now?
Not yet, ma'am.
No.
Yes, ma'am. Now we can see the screen.
You can see the screen. Great.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm basing this address around the NID experience and its historical context because it is India's premier design institute. Education in any given milieu always looks at the past for guidance, and using this as a touchstone transforms itself according to present demands. Let me start by sharing the experience of an outreach project that I worked on shortly after I joined NID in 2004. So NID had to design a strategic behavioral change communications campaign on disability prevention. It was a public health care initiative with the government of Gujarat and Handicap International to build the capacity of primary healthcare providers and raise the awareness of disability in the community. So we, the small team working on the project, were quite upbeat in the beginning that we would evolve a good media strategy and create some great content for our client. Then our field research commenced. It was conducted in 23 locations across 4 districts of Gujarat with various stakeholders, persons with disabilities, their families, community members, Anganwadi workers, dais, among others. So the stakeholders constituted a large number of people to understand knowledge, attitudes, and practice around disability. But very soon we realized that we had to start with an understanding of the phenomenon of disability itself. For one, our understanding of disability was limited. We had no theoretical orientation to disability ourselves. And the people from Handicap International did conduct a sensitization session with us, but that was not enough. So we had limited understanding of how disability is perpetuated through mythology and classical texts. I mean, we had not consciously reflected upon that. All this despite the fact that I had a lived experience of disability myself. Anyway, we started out by slowly acquainting ourselves with various models and approaches to disability and the vast terrain of disability studies globally and in India. So we looked up the negative cycle of disability. We looked up what is called the positive cycle of disability. And we looked up the a basic model of disability, which is called the morality model of disability, where at the center is the disabled person. And as you can see from the circles, it is a model that depends upon help, charity, and certain stereotypes prevail with respect to this particular model. Then we looked up the medical model of disability. Now, again, as you can see at the center, the problem in this model is vested on the disabled person. So both these models are based on the concept of personal tragedy, where the central problem is the disabled person. And then we learned about the social model of disability, which is a paradigmatic shift in the conception of disability, where the central problem, as you can see, is society. Because of its inaccessible built environment and public transportation, segregated education, inflexible work arrangements, and culture's accumulated myths, fears, stereotypes, and prejudices about disability. So what happened is that our lens gradually changed and shaped our perspective of disability as we went along. Now, during the fieldwork phase, we were shocked to see how differently disability was understood on the ground and not in the way we had come to know. For example, in a particular tribal belt, people considered inability to earn a living a disability. Mental retardation, which was at the time considered to be a disability under the Persons with Disabilities Act of 1994, was not considered to be one. Malpractices steeped in superstition abounded. So gradually we realized whom we needed to address, not the person with disability alone, but the community around the person. What we needed to communicate also therefore changed accordingly, and our focus shifted immensely, as you may well understand. So I'll skip this slide, but on the next slide, you see the scale of the project. This is what we did, the team at NID, over 2 years, over 18 months and then 6 months of testing. So the point I'm trying to make here is that this entire process over several months, through this, the specific slice of the local socio-cultural factors that we got firsthand actually changed the course of our project in terms of the final deliverables. So the social context was king and lent conceptual depth to our project. This was a lesson that we have kept with us for life. Now, this brings us to the missing links or lacunae in design education in India. As early as 1980, the wonderful Christopher Conford, British artist and writer, head of the Humanities Department at the Royal College of Art at the time, and a friend to NID, who was at NID on behalf of the UNDP to see how design education could be enriched, wrote this wonderful report called the NID Experience as Education and Inspiration. Now, what had happened before that is that a large number of students in the 70s expressed a need to get inputs in the liberal arts. As one student put it, education was seen as design, but he said, we need to know about life too. So in the report, Conford observed that inputs from the social sciences and even humanities at large had not been integrated well with design education. And he called these inputs general studies, a precursor to what we know today as science and liberal arts studies. So students often felt, he said, that inputs on society were an extra burden and cut into more legitimate time for professional training. Hence the resistance to it, a need to make it insignificant. Conford made a plea to the design community to accept these inputs emotionally and intellectually, not as a mere additive or ornament, but as basically an education in perspective. We must get students to ask questions as to why they are doing what they are doing, he said. So professional studies are those which seek answers to how questions and general studies to why questions, he said. The objective, according to him, is to provide inputs to broaden professional education. The emphasis is on understanding the potentialities and limitations of the humanities and social sciences. Understand the interaction between the individual and society, and also the interrelationships among humanities, technology, and design. So this wonderful thing is what he had to say. He said it is difficult to draw subject boundaries anywhere, since making is a perennial and universal activity of mankind, and design is an aspect of making. There is, in principle, no study which, if pursued with enthusiasm and imagination, might not in some unforeseeable way enhance design activity. Nevertheless, there are identifiable subjects which lie more obviously adjacent to design than others, unquote. Now, Conford was only furthering the spirit of the India Report, which you all may be familiar with, penned by Charles and Ray Eames, on which NID's philosophy is based, which delineated an appropriate design perspective for the country and which called upon future builders of the design profession to reflect a concern for values and attitudes towards the everyday lives of Indian people. The Eameses emphasized that the real challenge to the new institute would be a commitment to include a wide variety of disciplines in its professional education program. So Conford wanted students and faculty to develop what he called their critical muscle as part of the learning teaching process, a total appraisal and the formulation of prescriptive ideas and well-based criteria of judgment, explicitly founded in values outside design, by means of which standards in design activity may be maintained and enhanced. And hence he said this, that design education should make guerrilla-style raids on any domain of knowledge that it needs to exploit. And he demonstrated this view through this diagram, Design the Universe of Discourse. I'll pause for a while so that you can see what is on this diagram. Then we have Guy Bonsipi. He was a product designer, design theoretician, and faculty member in the Department of Product Design, Ulm, as you know. And he made a distinction between theoretical courses, which provide the student with directly design-relevant information, which he called instrumental knowledge, such as materials and processes, technical physics, etc., and theoretical process of a more general character, which one might call hermeneutical knowledge courses, which permit the student to interpret reality and appreciate what he called the multifarious manifestations of human activities. So that brings us to the point about why do we have such courses? What is the rationale and relevance of these kind of courses? I would say that these inputs on social aspects, or to take it further on the liberal arts, a foundation to the design curriculum and design practice, an essential precondition for qualified design practice. You see, design by nature is lateral and not vertical. It is an integrating activity that draws upon knowledge resources from a vast range of disciplines. And this knowledge cannot be mere juxtaposition. It cannot be a simple laying of one discipline alongside another. There has to be an integration of perspectives. There has to be a meeting of disciplines with the attendant openness and mutual respect, between fields of expertise. So not breaking down discipline boundaries in an iconoclastic manner. That is not what we need. Knowledge has its own way of seeping in through these chinks and crevices, and inputs from social science broaden the design perspective. They help to reflect upon and articulate the rationale and philosophy that underlies human actions and design practice, so that you may place it in a proper frame of reference. So then what happens? It enhances creativity. Knowledge of many subject areas makes for a cross-fertilization of ideas and incremental learning rather than a conceptual breakthrough. Like, the spinning jenny, for example, the way it evolved during the Industrial Revolution. A fullness of mind that produces new ideas and better understanding. So that takes us to this next point, which is design education needs to think about social issues not as isolated problems, but in a holistic manner. By society, we do not mean a monolithic entity, but a complex, differentiated, contradictory, interacting, and agglutinated several wholes. These wholes are held in this complex unity by culture, by the production, reproduction, and counterproduction of systems of symbols and meanings. Design is but one important site of study. However, it is always part of a society and its social structures and culture. It is inclusive rather than exclusive. And design both produces and is a product of human relationships. Therefore, it must be considered in its relationship to everything else in a given culture. As that is a tall order, the more modest task is to formulate a vocabulary through which it is possible in principle to think of the design activity in the widest possible context. Now, several years ago, I interviewed Sri Ashok Chatterjee, former director NID, on the formation of NID's strong social agenda and commitment to the rural and craft sector and social development projects almost from the very beginning. So he said that this was best exemplified through the Javaja project, as it is called, and mentioned how the project integrated many aspects: crafts, heritage, culture, social structure, design vocabulary, and NID's design inheritance. Yet, it was not simply a craft project. It was development which was defined as self-reliance for those who have been the most exploited in our society, for those who in our oppressive caste system have been at the bottommost, heap. So let us look at another example. And now let me go back to design for disability, with which I started this presentation today. So the way we design our houses, schools, public spaces, cities, transport systems, products, and services reflects ableist design principles that consign populations such as the aging and the disabled into the margins of society. Now, this mindset has led to a big problem of design education, and that is the study of anthropometry and establishing it as a standard tool for designers. You have these normative body types and measurements, thus feeding into stereotypes of normality and normativity, and has led to a further distancing of these communities from mainstream society. So design education, particularly industrial design, continues to be mired in assistive design and has not integrated in a meaningful way the approaches of inclusive or accessible design. Now, what does assistive design do? Assistive design creates specialized products used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities. Your walking sticks, aids and appliances, wheelchairs, and such like. Now, in such a case, the final product, as you will, product designers and industrial designers will well be familiar with, would typically uphold as its USP aspects such as, say, provision for disassembly or modularity of parts or ease of maintenance, or you might say storage and transportability, structural strength and ruggedness, or you might say accessibility and ease of operation, and comfort and feature enhancement. Now, nothing wrong with that. But small wonder that design practice, a direct outcome of design education, primarily considers designing for the disabled inappropriately as something for special need, rather than lifestyle aspirations. The disabled people are not supposed to aspire to a better or a different lifestyle. And so it has remained trapped in equally narrow markets where turnover and profitability are usually too low, to justify adequate investment in design itself. So as a result, what you have is a plethora of stigmatizing and poor quality aids and adaptations. So when designers look only at the clinical aspects of disability in designing for the disabled, they are still relegating design to the medical domain. Recall the medical model that I showed you earlier. It is as if designers are saying that disabled people are circumscribed because of their own functional or psychological limitations, which are imposed by their individual impairments and not by the social restrictions that are imposed by society. Because as I said earlier, when I showed you the slide of the social model, if everything were to be in place, universal design principles, accessible transportation, an accessible and inclusive built environment, then the actual impairment would cease to be. So for disabled people, more importantly, what happens in this case is that one is designing for the impairment and the person with the impairment rather than holistically looking at the shortcomings of the societal framework that impede their lives. Now, what I just spoke about is all about the politics of design. What disabled people may challenge in terms of design are their inability to consider the social conditions and relations in which such encounters take place, and the enveloping of their identity in medical terms. They may raise their voice for the importance of their voices to be heard and a much more effective participation in decisions which affect them. But if designers were to follow the approach of disability studies and keep a disability rights perspective, then the medical model's shortcomings could be considerably reduced. They would be able to interpret and reinterpret disability as a political category, which would definitely lead to a more holistic and humane approach. So user studies, then again, we see that user studies in classroom design projects are also often limited. The user is completely reduced to design-specific data and may disappear in the process. Gender differences are also considered only through anthropometric data in the ergonomic study. So the position of the user study is primarily concerned in such projects with strictly functional problems that I have mentioned earlier. Maneuvering, stability, physical fatigue of the user, and bodily safety. Of course, these are critical concerns, but as I said earlier, psychological or social aspects, the self-esteem of the person with a disability, these are not considered. Studies on disability models and in-depth interviews with the people themselves to understand the phenomenological aspects of disability are lacking. There is usually, if you look at mobility aids, especially even those that are designed for the needs of children with disabilities, you will find that there is a techno-medical sort of feel to them. Such devices have straps and ties and multiple parts. No effort is made to humanize the aesthetics. At a formal level, it is at the same level as crutches and calipers. An association that many disabled people and especially disabled children will perhaps not fail to make. This has been, a grouse that I have had over the years while I have been at this design institute, that designing for disability invariably translates into designing the next best wheelchair or crutch. And, there is no consideration given to the aesthetics of these appliances and aids. And most wheelchairs end up looking like a glorified sort of wheelbarrow, if I may put it that way. So this has obvious consequences with regards to the perception of people with disabilities, but little has been done to mitigate this. So raising of various substantive issues in this way will train students to reflect critically upon the actual problems that they face in society and in their work with the help of intellectual tools of discourse, and build that critical muscle that Conford was talking about. Only with such reflection can they consider their problems as well as possible alternatives to them carefully and explicitly. This approach is congruent with the overall understanding at NID, namely that the best learning comes out of relentless and restless questioning and active participation. Of course, you might argue that there's no direct need for an exposure to, say, philosophy or, psychology or social science. It certainly will not improve the quality of a color scheme for a product. Very often students raise such questions. However, that makes the difference between a program which contents itself with narrow-minded professionalism and a program that goes beyond these limitations. Disciplines can rapidly lose the porosity that can enrich them and ossify into rigid and hard compartments and even regimes by drawing and redrawing boundaries around them. So even within a discipline, haven't we often found implicit or explicit distinctions which mark what is considered more designerly and less designerly, the hard versus the soft, or the theoretical versus the practical? Now, these distinctions are not really innocent, they're far from innocent, because they form the basis on which cognitive and social hierarchies are built. Hence, the dire need to break out of categories and move into more fluid, multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary spaces. So, you need an education that is conducted in a spirit of free inquiry, undertaken without concern for topical relevance or vocational utility. That develops a worldview of design students, underpinning the fact that design functions within a larger interdisciplinary framework embedded in a very real socio-cultural and economic context and not in isolation. That encourages you to be generalists and lateral thinkers instead of blinkered specialists. That heightens your awareness of the human and natural worlds you inhabit, of what Bonsipi in his report called the multifarious manifestations of human activities, but one that urges you to break away from the hallowed portals of the seeming naturalness of social phenomena. So you learn to question these and lay bare the subversive potential of the phenomena. This would be an education that helps see diverse points of view, to provide a sense of history in order to form links between the past, the present, and the future. You need an education that is attitude shaping and makes you more reflective about your beliefs and choices, more self-conscious and critical of your own presuppositions and motivations, more perceptive of the privileges you enjoy or the way others are oppressed and rendered marginal, more tolerant of differences. That makes you capable of informing yourselves about the issues that arise in your lives, personally or professionally and socially. So if we do reflect in this manner, we are actually talking about an education that is ultimately a preparation for the rest of our lives. If we cannot have such an education, then what will happen? We shall just be mired in our own shallow lives. So a well-rounded understanding and an intellectual but sensitive panorama which shows the relative disposition of things and ideas is what you can get when you work from within the framework of humanities, social science, and the emergent transdisciplinary insights. Such a systematic view of reality gives you an understanding of hierarchies and relationships, which things are more valuable or important than others, how one thing is dependent on another, and what is associated with or caused by something else. So the ability to synthesize different perspectives into the big picture is far more powerful than narrow expertise in any single field. The endeavor is to support all core design courses by creating intellectual spaces, which make it possible for reflection on the practice of design and for critical thinking. Such an activity involves that you examine structures and processes which form the basis of design practice, and that you bring into focus the psychological, socio-cultural, economic, and political aspects which impinge on your own design practice. Developing such a system takes time and commitment from both academics and institutions. And anyway, we all know that understanding the language of other disciplines takes time and takes patience. The most important thing is to make a beginning. Thank you. I also take this opportunity to congratulate the graduating students at SPA today.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a really engaging lecture.
Thank you, Saurabh.
And we have a lot of questions from viewers. And thankfully, we are a little ahead of time. So we will just take these questions up before we move to our third guest for today.
Yeah, we are ready.
Yes, sir.
Maybe Shilpa last first.
Pradeep sir, good evening.
Good evening, Shilpa. It was a wonderful, it brought back memories of my state, and I think we should keep listening to people like you just to not get off the track of design. We bring back a lot of older thoughts.
Coming from you, it means a lot, but I was deeply privileged to listen to you today. I've been wanting to invite you to NID as we here, and today I have the privilege to listen to you. Thanks to SPA.
Thank you.
Okay. So the first question is by Saurabh Tiwari, and this is a question for Pradeep sir. And it reads, how do we incorporate the idea of cultural and indigenous wisdom in AI?
Yeah, very, very deep question, very nice question. See, culture, I always tell my students in this culture class, whether it is semantics or semiotics or whatever I teach, is that culture is a form of intelligence. You see, don't forget, culture is not just dancing, music, art, fine arts, and all that as we see visually. Actually, it is a form of intelligence which we contribute and we also derive from as a broth, and we keep changing it, we keep giving it and deriving from it. So when we talk of culture as an intelligence without which a community cannot actually survive anywhere in the world, any type of culture it is, we further look at this intelligence as two types of knowledge. One is tacit knowledge and the other is the implicit knowledge. Implicit knowledge is what you see all around you and visually, and you live the world, and that becomes a culture. But tacit knowledge is something which you imbibe, it gets into your genes, and then it makes you behave in a particular way. I'm sure after 30 years, one can easily spot another designer in the first few sentences that designer speaks anywhere in the world, whether one knows whether that person is a designer or not. So, see, it is this sort of tacit knowledge about, sensitivity, awareness, that is what we need to concentrate on. And this is exactly what the emphasis was on, even by Shilpa Das, when she was saying that, social sciences and arguing for all those things are to be first fine-tuned. Then we have to understand culture. Actually, design schools are not making so much efforts to understand culture in a way it is to be understood. See, the ethnographers, humanities, social scientists, they are doing it well. But we can't simply take what they are saying and use it in design. We have to interpret culture as what designers need to, and make our own rules and regulations and then separate the tacit knowledge from the implicit knowledge. Implicit knowledge actually, very soon designers will realize, is noise. We don't want it. A hoarding in Madras of a megastar, splashy film being released, it has deeper layers of implications in it. We can't simply go by the opulsio or nature of that culture that is there. So we need to go deeper, and what is it that drives it? So this part must be highlighted, and yes, a lot of work needs to be done by culture specialists. As I said, it's a form of intelligence, and like any other intelligence, it needs to be highlighted, made aware of, brought out, made students sensitive, and the question of ethics, question of what is right, appropriate, those will arise. But it's good that they arise. In engineering, what we say is, hey, that's not engineering, leave it. But I think in design, we need to make those questions, like Shilpa said, we need to make students at least ask the questions. Let it remain as a question, and that I think is what would be the answer to that question that Tiwari asked.
Thank you, sir. I hope that answers the question. The next question is again for Pradeep, sir. The question is by Harsh, and he asked that when we talk about UX with IoT, can we say UX is fading with respect to its deliverables? UX is mostly seen through the lens of digital fluency. Is it correct?
Well, it depends from what point of view and in which industry one is taking a look at it. You see, the definition of UX itself is wrong everywhere. UX is understood as a layer. It's not. It's an. That's what we are trying to say. It's experience. And if to understand experience, if you want to define it that way and layer it and examine it, it's fine. Right? Then you can call it digital fluency and so on and so forth. But everything is interconnected, and we cannot simply say there's a UX specialist, there's a UI specialist, there is a other specialist. The industry expects today, a full stack designer, whatever it means, and we need to look beyond our narrow eyes. If it is happening as such, then we as designers should take the responsibility to go and inform, saying that it is deeper. It's not just to be dismissed off as simply a child of other variables.
Okay. Thank you, sir. The next question is for Shilpa, ma'am. This is from Saket.
Sorry, there is one question on my chat box here, and I can take it later also, but I thought I should mention that there is one question on my chat box here.
No, we take it now. No issues. I can take my questions after that.
Okay, that's yeah, thank you very much, Shilpa. Very kind of you. Can I? But Rick, can I take this question? Right now?
Yeah. Sure, sir. Sure.
Yeah, good. So now, see, the question is from Professor Sukanta Mujumdar. He says, how do you position Baho's learning in this new way of things in design academics? It's a question that will start a war. It is going to, there I see Shilpa smiling, and we know, but actually there's no need for it. Because I will share one screen, just me, because otherwise I'll keep talking, and I'll just share a screen in with respect to the answer to it. And just a moment, please bear with me till I finish these clicks and 1,000 things. Yeah. Can you see this slide on the screen?
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so see, Sukant has asked what was actually. Of course, we are grateful to Bauhaus because they were the first ones to bring all the three fellows together: the craftsman, the artist, and the thinker and the architect also. So we would actually, the question is interesting because what would have happened if Bauhaus was allowed to continue? No, the whole course of design would have been different. But later we had Ulm in 1950s. But before that, if you look at Bauhaus instructions curriculum, they had glass, clay, stone, wood, metal, textiles, and color. This is their pedagogy and curriculum wheel in basic courses. Now, you see, while the philosophy can be retained, we have to move on. We have to look at what is happening today in the world of industry. My previous presentation was Industry 4, and we have to move on. Design schools of an era have importance for that era and the learnings that they give us. And therefore, Bauhaus is incredible. And then we had Ulm in 1950s. This particular school has had great influence on those institutions that try to bring in technology as part of design. And in fact, Bauhaus also has a lot of technology. It's never left it. So in 1950s, where even IDC was influenced on, we have to go back in history and not forget history, because those who do not know history are condemned to repeat it. I keep saying this, and I get into controversies and wars and arguments with my own colleagues in faculty and design and wherever I go, wherever I pitch for the new curriculum. Okay, so see, the Ulm School closed in 1968, having undergone various forms of pedagogy and leadership crisis in structure and personality. Nor the faculty or student body found resolution to the problems inherent to industrial design's claim to social legitimacy. You see, we need to also see what happened to these schools. If the schools don't keep pace with what is happening in industry, a lot of things changed in industry then. The third revolution happened, second revolution started happening, and we couldn't resolve. So I think schools born do their work and they quietly go into the shadows, leaving behind a lot of rich experience. And this school actually basic courses, they brought in cinematography, architecture, economics, philosophy, psychology, politics, visual communication. They improved upon this one, and then they went on. So Ulm, actually great things it has done. Instead of designing forms, Ulm taught how to generate the rules behind the forms, namely what we call computations today, right? The scientific methods were introduced by them. So each school has its own, so later on, all the design schools in the world are influenced by them. RCA, MIT, Stanford, Alto, take any of these and you will find this particular relationship. So of course, NID, I am also an NIDian, by the way. So NID, it started an extraordinary era in India, no doubt about it. Then we were joined by IDC era. Then we have briefly an IIS era, for which I am responsible. I set up that design school at Indian Institute of Science, and I got a lot of bankings also for completely changing the rules of design, and so the intention is to make design contemporary there. So I did not change design in IISc at all. So then comes the DoD era. In DoD, again, it is trying to be contemporary, come to information technology, information sciences. And next we are now talking about Industry 4. So this is continuous, and I think the change is an absolute necessity. That's my next slide, which I will go on for the next presentation, which I don't intend to. So I will now close my screen and I will stop sharing it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So I
Thank you,
hope
sir.
I have answered the question that Sukanta asked.
Yeah, that change will come, and continuously we have to change our own program, own design curriculum accordingly required.
Well said, sir. I would go one step ahead, Professor. I would say the change will not come. You be the, I mean, you make it come, force it to come. This is what it is. Yeah, we'll fight out. I said it'll start a world war. It did. At the DOD, it did. And but 20 years down the line, yeah, we realize that we may be correct. Of course, it means that visual communication, graphic design, product design, these things seem to find lesser importance, but it's not so. I keep arguing with my colleagues that, see, who stopped you from doing all that is to be done in graphic design, digital design? Nobody. I mean, you chose to cling to old curriculum, old methods. You didn't want to experiment, and then you can't blame something called UX that is coming on like a Bhuta, or just eclipsing the world. So, but jobs are there, and that is what it is. In short, as an answer.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So I'll ask the next question. This is by Anik for Shilpa ma'am. And he asks, how can design institutes encourage their students to address and reflect on the politics of design?
Mike, madam.
Ma'am, I think your mic is off.
Thank you. Sorry. So that's a good question. Thank you. And this is a question that actually pertains to education at large and not simply to design education, because then we would once again be in the trap of looking at something which needs to be looked at a macro level in a very micro way. So the thing is, it's very easy to do that because you need to, not take what is given to you at face value and accept it as the truth. And in today's day and age, in this day and age of the internet and social media, and where you have a deluge of facts, data, and information that is thrown at you, sometimes without adequate credibility, and how do you really decide upon that? It is extremely important to look beneath the surface level of things. Whatever you read, whatever you come across, whatever anyone says, and I do not mean this in a negative way, as if you are copying and cribbing and pulling out the flaws in everything, but you need to not take things at face value. You need to think for yourselves, and you need to question everything. Ask why. In our ancient texts, in the Upanishads, there was this character who used to always ask his father Udalaka, the sage Udalaka, why to everything. Shwetaketu he was called, and you therefore have, that's a very profound story which you can look up, and that's an aside in a sense, but you can look it up later. But all I'm saying is that questioning also comes with time, with experience. It is like exercising your muscles. It is like it's as simple as being exercising every day or taking a walk in order to be fit. So it is just something you engage in in a regular sort of manner on a daily basis, and that's what it is all about. Because what one might call the truth is always something elusive. It's a slippery terrain. And what is the truth? What may be true to me may not be true to Pradeep sir, or may not be true to Kavita or to Rick, for example. So the same thing may be interpreted by different people in different ways. So it's just something you do. Just jump in at the deep end and engage in that exercise, if I have to put it in one pithy sentence.
Thank you, ma'am. There's another question for you, and this is by Saurav Tiwari. He asks how technology will address the marginalized.
Now again, look, technology, of course, it depends on what social phenomenon you are looking at, really, Saurabh, as I'm sure you understand. But for example, because I was talking about disability in my lecture, technology alone is not enough, and that is what disability rights activists and advocates and people who are into advocacy, people who are disability studies theorists, that is what we are talking about, you know. And this is also, it's not the perennial hard aspects versus softer aspects debate. It really has to do with the lived experiences of people, because unless you empathize with that, unless you truly try and understand a slice of social reality, whatever the issues be, you know, technology alone is never going to be the answer. Technology can sometimes, of course it can empower for sure, there's no doubt about it, but if we just look at, and Pradeep sir will have to excuse me when I make these statements, but technology alone is never the key, you know. You need to in connection with the previous question that was addressed to me, you know, there is always another notion that is involved, the aspect of culture, the aspect of the politics underlying things, and in terms of say disability, there's a notion of the body that is involved, you know. So are we to be concerned about the physical body as a matter of ergonomics alone, or the disabled body as something that is supported by aids and appliances that are, or surgeries, you know, corrective surgeries are supposed to be like God gives you and you will be able to lead your lives normally. That's not the thing. It's also about cultural notions of the body, it's also about social attitudes, and in which case there are issues about you know, the normative body and so on. What differences is what one must see. The phenomenological, the lived experiences of people is what one needs to consider, and what are the larger issues involved in the act of designing. And technology can then simply be another sort of tool that may lead one on that path. So I think more important than technology in such cases, in such specific cases, would be the complex and sometimes tenuous relations to, say, issues of identity, for example. But again, Saurabh, we are living in an age that is driven by information. We are rapidly being engulfed. Everybody is empowered today. You know, just today in my housing colony, somebody texted that there was this guy who is supposed to be painting our apartments, and when someone said that, why don't you paint the exterior of my house today, he looked up on his phone the weather, and then he said, look, at 3 p.m. we are going to have rain, so we're not going to be able to do this. And he was really amazed, you know. So he, in this WhatsApp group that we have in the colony, he sort of mentioned that. So technology is ubiquitous. Information technology, again, is ubiquitous. It's all around us, and a great leveler in society, but only for those who can afford it. And but again, these are also incremental changes, you know. Somebody had to invent the wheel, some early human at some point, for Henry Ford to come along millennia later and to develop the idea into the automobile. So the point I'm trying to make in this roundabout sort of manner is just this, that simply taking recourse to technology is never going to be enough, because we are human beings. I hope I have been able to answer in some way what you were asking.
It's a topic for a conference thread, actually.
I know.
Thank you, ma'am. So, Pradeep sir, we would also like to know your view on this topic.
Yeah, I was tempted. You see, that's a very interesting question. The moment you word politics came in, and all the year everything starts coming up. See, I teach a course called Design Management to our as a final year students. We wait till they try all their antics, 4 years, this, that, and then they come and they are about to now enter the job market. catch hold of them there in that course, which is put in the last semester. And then, one of the lectures or one of the topics is designers have to be politicians. Otherwise, it is impossible to survive outside. And then, then it starts slowly saying the politicians of a good kind for the sake of design. And then it starts how, what. So every sentence, including gender sensitization, because there are quite a large number of ladies, girls in the class. And so we say, look, everything becomes a political if one takes it. So a designer cannot escape politics. If engineering is politics, if technology is politics, if science is politics today, all around the newspapers and all with this COVID and all that, then why not design shy away from politics? We need to teach ethical politics. We need to train our designers. Designers normally, as people inside, are soft. I mean it. I mean, they, after some time, they give up. They are very emotional. They are, because that's how they are made, and that is their strength actually. But we need to impart to them what is politics. And yes, I pick up a lot of dirty cases also, and then there are questions, there are giggles. Then I said, no, but then this is real world. If design has to survive, you have to become partly a politician. But you should know when, and otherwise, becoming a full-time politician, no, then you leave design. That's what is my answer to many of these students. Very interesting question, but.
May I add something to this, please, since we do have a couple of minutes. So is it okay, Rick?
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Yeah. So in 2006, I was at Hawaii, and on my first day there, I was standing at this bus stop, okay, waiting for a bus to come. And then all around me, there were so many people going around on the road on motorized wheelchairs. So I was standing there and wondering whether, one always thinks that it's only in South Asia that you have more polio cases or quadriplegics and paraplegics. But how is it that there are so many people on wheelchairs? And then a bus came. So suddenly I realized that everybody who was standing and waiting at the bus stop with me, they sort of moved to one side. And what I see is that a person on a wheelchair wheels himself right to the front. The driver presses a button there, and so that hydraulic step comes out. And those buses back in 2006, we didn't see in India. Yeah. And then the step with the wheelchair lifted the person in. Then there was space inside enough for the person to move and maneuver the wheelchair. Everybody who was sitting in the first row inside the bus stood up. And, like we have in our railway coaches, they stood up and they folded that seat. So this person goes there, takes something like a seat belt and straps himself so that the wheelchair doesn't move around in the bus, and so on and so forth. And then the bus started moving when we all got in. So that set me thinking, I mean, I said, my God, it's not just enough to have wheelchairs or the best of, techno aids and appliances. It's also a culture. It's also civic sense. It's also the society there where, because there were curb cuts on the footpath. Of course, in our sort of country, poverty, illiteracy and all that are part of a complex rubric which sort of deny us, and of course lack of political will and motivation that prevent us from reaching there. But I thought that it is that enabling environment that I saw there was, and I saw people on wheelchairs in restaurants, in cinema halls and so on. Where do we find people in India using wheelchairs in movie halls or in restaurants? You will not find elderly people in malls, for example, because the floors are terrible, So it's also, as I said, mere technology alone is not the answer.
Thank you, ma'am. So we have our next speaker with us, and I would like to remind our viewers that for the next talk, if you have any kind of question, you can type that in the YouTube comment section. So I would just like to introduce the next speaker. So Dr. Deepa Butoliya is a designer and academic with an intersectional perspective of design and design research. She has a keen interest in understanding design from a decolonial perspective and investigating various global designerly practices that are marginalized in the mainstream discourse. So now I would request Dr. Butoliya to kindly take over.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you Rick, for the wonderful introduction. Let me just figure out my... So is it visible? I'm using this for the first time.
Yes,
Yes,
it
ma'am,
is
it is
perfect.
visible.
Okay, great. Let me
Yes,
see.
Deepa, let's make it full screen.
Yes, and can I open my notes in the same screen? I just don't want to full screen. And is that working now?
Yes, ma'am, it's full screen right now.
Okay, but I don't see my own notes then. What's the best way that I can make it full screen and also see my notes? Sorry.
You can share just one screen, and then rest of the thing you can open.
So I try to say present my tab. Is it showing the entire screen?
We can see the presentation titled Critical Jugaad. That's visible on the...
But is it full screen?
Not full screen right now.
Okay. Because I've shared. Let's go away. Let me see if I can do that. So sorry about that. Just trying to figure out this thing. Okay. All right, let's see if this works. So good evening, everyone, and I would like to offer my apologies for not being present earlier, just because of a familial situation. And so, as the topic suggests today, I am going to focus on this idea of Jugaad that I've been working on for a long time, which is nothing new about this. All of us must be pretty familiar with this idea, but I want to present this idea, this topic, with a lens of Jugaad or critical Jugaad as a critical making practice, and provide a lens of social justice to this practice. And the reason why I chose this topic is to highlight the potential of design practice as a practice of social justice, and the role of an activist as a designer, and also designer as an activist. From what I understand, most of this design festival is for the graduating designers. So congratulations to the batch, and congratulations to all of you for organizing this wonderful design festival from SPA. And I was lucky enough to participate this time because I ended up being in India, and so I'm really happy to be here. And for all these budding designers, and even as established professionals, I think it is our responsibilities towards our profession and the society at large to be ethical, especially to those who are at the receiving ends of our actions, which could only happen when we apply a critical lens and to the study and practice of design, and by extension to the making. Okay. So I'm just a bit technically challenged today. So, all right. So obviously we are here because we all have love and passion for design. We are in the field and practice of design, and I came to this practice because I loved making. The whole sort of tactile nature of making and the constructionist nature of making was what attracted me to this field. But how we understand design today is basically as a cultural instrument that defines how we understand our world, which is often intertwined and overshadowed with its colonial past and is entrenched in the patriarchal, racist, and heteronormative ideologies. And based on this idea of design, sort of I laid out my future journey. And out of all my research areas, what I am actually interested in mostly is this examples of design futures or futurities that are based on non-linear and non-Western notions of design, and especially those in the context of speculative and critical design. And so I'm going to just focus on that topic today and not get into the whole sort of my whole research framework. And so I'm pretty sure everybody is now quite aware of this speculative and critical design, which is a subgenre of design that basically deals with how we engage with our technological futures. I say that because a few years ago I had a few conversation with some of students, and they were really not, this field was really not that well known or sort of well conversed around because of its very Western origins. And what I really find interesting in this whole idea of speculative and critical design is that the entire current literature that is available out there, which is pretty small, actually, just I can sort of sum it in these 3 books. It actually offers most of the perspectives that are offered are pretty much like our understanding of design from a Western Eurocentric narrative, and it's often sort of how it's embedded mostly with and engages mostly with science and technologies. And sort of this whole idea of speculative and critical design and design futures and so-called discursive design, I found it very unsettling because of the lack of this non-Western or more global South perspective in the literature and discourse and practice of this field. And the whole idea as it grows, and now it's pretty much referred as speculative futures, and it's growing through conferences and sort of courses, and even the whole degree programs are now dedicated to this idea of speculative design. I feel that there is a huge potential and scope of sort of expanding this field and offering alternatives to the mainstream narratives. And there is a sort of a good amount of literature and practice out there that actually deals with these alternatives and provides the something that we are actually engaging with in real time when we have discourses about futures. And I think, like, as someone from India, someone who has studied and practiced in India, I think these sort of this limited idea of what futures could be and what design futures could be. And so I started looking into this idea of Jugaad is what it exists, how it exists currently, how it is understood in our Indian psyches or South Asian psyches at large, and how do we understand it, and how do we often tend to dismiss it because it is something that we are taught not to engage with or not to take seriously because it's just so omnipresent, it's just so everywhere, and at most it is given the status of design for development, something that is sort of a quick fix, and which is also seen in a lot of critique of Jugaad, that this is not going to take India forward, or this is not the real sort of way in how we can understand design, especially coming from India. But I just think that because it's so omnipresent that we do not even notice how amazing this making practice is, how resilient this practice is, and how subversive this practice is, especially towards powers of oppression. And I just joined in when you guys were having discussion about design as politics, and there couldn't be a better example of design as politics, as this practice is coming from the very bottom, especially from those who really cannot find a place for themselves in the mainstream power structures created especially by design and technology and making. So I don't know if you can see my screen, but the image I'm showing here, I find this example really appealing, especially when I have a conversation about Jugaad, because this person right now, I don't think he's going to survive a crash, but definitely he's getting away with something, sort of a rule or regulation about having helmets. I am going to just interrupt and ask if everything is working properly.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Yes, okay, just to be clear, because I'm not getting any audio feedback, so I hope it's all working fine.
Yes, ma'am.
So what I think what I want to posit here is not just Jugaad as a very clever way to survive or a quick fix or use of resources in an excellent, brilliant manner, but Jugaad as a future imaginary, especially for a sustainable post-petroleum world. And I'm pretty much, I am aware, and I'm pretty sure all of you are aware about how this whole idea of DIY and making and Jugaad is found in many practices of design that are existing from analog to digital, or sort of concepts like adhosicism or bricolage, thoughtless acts by Jane Fulton Surrey, or repurposing. So it's there, it's already there. So there's nothing to be explained or understood. I think what we need is a new lens to look. And especially what I'm trying to offer is, when we talk about future, when we talk about design futures, we often tend to ignore things that are already there, things that could sort of give us this pathway for sort of making in the future, or surviving in the future, or speculating a future where Jugaad is a legitimate practice, which I think and I believe it is a very legitimate, very authentic design practice that's coming from an everyday designer. It is an act of everyday resistance and everyday making done in a very political way. Especially when talking about making, again, our ideas about making are pretty much sort of limited to and make magazines and make fairs, but what is making actually? It's what we do as designers. There's material, there's a process, there's technique, there's temporality and making, and all these everyday practice that we find in the real everyday India. I find that as a very authentic form of making, and it is a very viable and sustainable and social means of production, which is paramount in the subsistence and survival of maker ecologies, especially from those coming from the global south. And as we can see, sort of how these practices show themselves as little nuggets of how they could exist in future. And I found these examples really interesting and really intriguing in terms of how technology has, or sort of we have adopted technology in terms of using these practices. Sort of going to skip over, and when especially when we talk of our collective knowledge and collective psyches. So speaking of, because speculative and critical designers also engage a lot with the sort of the future practice or the futures community. And there's this really well-known quote that says that future is already here. It is just not evenly distributed. And this is again said in context of sort of science and technology related futures. And I find this really interesting because it applies really well to, especially to our community. If you look around, our idea of future, even our ideas of present, do not map with the experiences of this everyday people who are still sort of not even in the sort of phase of a pre-petroleum world, so to speak. And so their only hope is technology adaptation to their best. And I think this is the way in our sort of in our understanding how we understand how technology is used and incorporated and consumed in our society in a very sort of bottom line approach. And so I think what I'm trying to offer here is if we provide a critical lens to this whole idea of Jugaad and what that practice becomes. On one hand, we have this sort of high-end practice of speculative and critical design that deals with very Western, sterile, futuristic ideas of how science and technology could be and could affect
Now I think we lost your voice. Can everyone hear, ma'am?
No, I think there seems to be some error with the connection.
Yes. I'll just call her.
Yes, sir, please. I think technology glitches is a part and parcel of exhibition. That's what we are having right now.
Especially when it is online.
I know, right?
Deepa is joining back.
Okay, sir. I would like to remind our viewers that we'll be taking questions after this session. Okay, Deepa ma'am is back. Please continue, ma'am. Your mic seems to be on mute. Ma'am, could you please unmute the mic?
Sorry about the connection issues.
No issues, ma'am.
So let me see how can I go back to. Is my screen visible now, or?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay. All right. So I think this is the framework that I was talking about, and how sort of critical Jugaad fills in the gap in terms of making do and survival and representing criticality from the global south that moves beyond the Western understanding of criticality in design. This tool also reinforces my previous argument establishing Jugaad as a legitimate mode of practice along with design. And I know and I understand and I acknowledge that all Jugaad is appropriation, Jugaad politicizes that appropriation. How are we doing on time? Do I have 15 more minutes? Okay, I didn't get an answer
Hello,
to that,
hello.
but
Yes, ma'am.
I think
Yes,
I'm
ma'am. You do.
yes. Okay, okay. And so to support that position, I was sort of exploring different alternatives to speculative and critical designs, especially from non-Western perspectives. And I'm not limiting my research and my practice to just the South Asian subcontinent, but I'm also looking at other cultures, a lot of African cultures, a lot of South American cultures that also have similar understanding of design and making, and also have practices like Jugaad. And so to support this idea, I kind of organized an exhibition where my main inquiry was rooted in exploring the implications of a pluriversal account of critical Jugaad and a post-speculative and critical design practice. And the exhibition was called Climatic Post-Normal Design. And I'm not going to go into much detail about it, but I was really interested in using a face mask that is often found in protests, which is sort of a Jugaad DIY version of a gas mask. And my question was, my piece was a question itself, that something that comes from a non-designer or sort of someone who is not officially trained in design, and an artifact that actually does not look like a designed artifact, is it something that we can place as a design artifact in a museum or a gallery? So anyways, moving on, I find, sort of to give you a comparison, that I find these practices to be much more critical than the criticality of practices offered by critical design. Now moving on to the DIY making and maker spaces, and sort of understanding of how we use these terms and how we understand it in different contexts. Especially for a hybrid person like me, who has my own past experiences have been design education that came from India. My experiences came from India, sort of a non-Western context, and now my sort of karma bhumi or practice or work is in a very non-Western American world. And so I started comparing, and I sort of use these terminologies to understand how we understand making in a non-Western context. For example, in making in Western context is understood as a very new artisanal, something that gives pleasure, something that is to differentiate from industry. It's about expressiveness. It's an alternative to production. It's about sort of using tools like 3D printing, etc. And if you look at making, what qualifies as making in a non-Western context, it's about survival, it's about adversity, it's about resilience, it's about subsistence, it's about critical awareness, it's in response to lack of modes of production. It's about affordability, and it's about what's at hand, and it's above all, it's a cultural practice. So I think this is differences of just understanding a terminology in two different contexts. And so when we use the term repair, sort of maker spaces, that sort of comes out of this whole idea of making in Western context, and by extension about design. I think what our society needs right now mostly is repair spaces and not maker spaces. Again, this is also now sort of embedded in this whole idea of Jugaad, his whole idea of criticality through Jugaad, criticality through and expressiveness through making. And our country is full of such repair spaces and repair ecologies, but they do not enjoy the same status as sort of maker spaces, so-called maker spaces in the Western world. And if you understand a spot like that, just a roadside phone repair shop, these are becoming as hubs of technology exchange in our country and in many other countries, non-Western countries. And these qualify as those centers of design and making that we often ignore and we often overlook, because they do not fit in with the definition offered by this colonial understanding of design, which has to come from studios or say these design labs. And so I think I'm just trying to provide here is an alternative viewpoint of how we can understand making as a social justice practice, which also extends this idea of how can all these practices be encompassed into a single idea, and how can it be useful to us as designers and design students. And when we talk about future, especially coming from a speculative and critical design community that I'm actively involved in, there's this whole idea of global futures, especially what I'm trying to offer to the field of design is helping us all think about global South futures. And there are several examples that already exist that can show how these practices can be manifested, not only in a creative sort of artifactual way, but also in a critical and political way that comes from different practices like these Afro-futurist eye sculptures by Cyrus Kabiru, or this concept of Afro-Gallenism by Sergi Atuquai, which he offers a critique of this global flow of artifacts to countries like Ghana, where they are sort of loaded with these jerry cans, and how they have become sort of a backyard of the world. And I see these are mostly political and artistic positions that offer, but I can already see how these can be substitute to the existing critical design practice. How these can offer different modes of production and viewing and expressiveness and resilience and subversion that lacks in the sort of the frameworks we have right now. And these are not just artistic practices that I'm talking about. These practices are actually offered as a way to survive in future. There's this organization called Design for Disasters, which is a Thai interdisciplinary design group where designers and architects and teachers and everyday people come together and think about what sort of solutions they can devise if Thailand is again flooded by tsunami. And what I found most interesting is they are just sort of training citizens, everyday people, by using Jugaad-like techniques with whatever is at hand to make flotation devices that can actually save lives. Because as glamorous as the tourism industry makes Thailand look, they are actually pretty resource they have scarcity of resources just like us. And in the flood 2014 and 2011, there were a lot of these solutions that actually emerged from everyday people and everyday surroundings. And so this has become a thing in itself. And we, as designers, I don't see ourselves doing something like that in our design context and in our design world. But this practice could be actually pretty interesting and actually could be futures oriented. This is also an image from the same organization or same group, where they are actually doing pretty interesting photo shoots to kind of sort of remind people of the power of DIY, the power of Jugaad, and sort of taking care of future or saving yourselves, because nobody's going to show up at the last minute. And as we can see right now, anything can happen. The whole world can stop in a second. And no matter how much we invest in AI and technology, or machine learning or Google, but at the end of the day, it sort of boils down to what we can do as humanity to save ourselves. And so these are just a few examples that I thought sort of represent. It is not the entire depth of the concept I'm trying to offer here, so I'm just sort of scratching the surface, so to speak, to kind of explain what this concept could mean and how it could evolve in future, and how us as designers could actually embrace what we have as a culture, as a community, and take all these alternative positions and perspectives and sort of think about future in a more holistic way. And so just to end it and sum it up, I just want to provide that critical Jugaad could be a much needed alternative to the mainstream discourse on making, a mainstream discourse on future, and even mainstream discourse on design. So with that, I would like to end my presentation and would like to take some questions.
Thank you, Dr. Butoliya, for bringing a perspective of Jugaad to light. Being Indians, we managed to find space for Jugaad in our daily lives, I'm sure. You have surely given us some interesting points to ponder upon. Now we'll take up some questions from the viewers.
Sure.
So the first question is from Rit Bhattacharjee. He says, capitalism has already taken charge of the world, of the whole COVID-19 situation. How relevant do you think Jugaad would be to control the whole situation in a place like this? He mentions, I saw an image the other day of rural women wearing a leaf mask, but then again, I'm not sure how effective that was.
Exactly. Very, I mean, it's a cliche, but it's a really good question because in sort of spending time here for the past 6 months, and I've seen the pandemic rise and rise, and I've actually been, I know there are certain theories I espouse, and as academics, we like to romanticize ideas like Jugaad, and but I totally acknowledge sort of the limitations of this practice. There cannot be leaf masks. Leaf masks is not going to save the world, especially in something. So reality has hit the ground, even for me, even for my theoretical positions, even for my positions as a scholar in my scholarly concepts like critical Jugaad. I questioned myself time and again. And I've found that there's often limitations to every practice, to every positions, as there's limitation to science and technology. Even Google has done nothing to save us from COVID-19. It couldn't predict all this huge community of astrologers, two futurists like Stuart Candy. I don't think they can even predict what was happening and how design can actually help us in this situation. So similar to design, there are limitations to Jugaad. All the people that I meet, people who are taking care of our households, for example, those who cannot, let's say, cannot afford masks, although to be honest, it's pretty affordable. I've seen that there's nothing that replaces an actual mask. It won't save a leaf won't save your life. An inverted diaper won't save your life. A plastic bottle won't save your life. And so are the limitations of the artifact in question, the mask itself. How much do you think is it actually saving us? If you see at how people are using masks, I went to buy a mask the other day, and my sister was trying out masks, and I was laughing at her like, how can you just try out things? And the person selling the mask was okay with it, because I said that you already contaminated 3 pieces of mask, and he kept it back on the counter, and I think the ones we bought were pre-contaminated themselves. So there's this whole idea of masks saving us from any pandemic is also in question. So I think we should just not take ourselves so seriously. I never take myself so seriously when, especially in real life situation. I'm not saying myself in my position as a scholar with all these big theories. And so I think at the end of the day, we are all human beings and trying to make sense of this situation that we are all in. And sometimes Jugaad is the solutions. Most of the times it may not be. So I think I sort of offered some relief there.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for answering the question. The other question is from Saurabh Tiwari. He asks, is Jugaad seen as an exotic practice in the Western world or seen as a derogatory form of design? He mentions design with a capital D.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a sort of a hardcore, clean lines drawn answer to that, or a straight-jacketed answer to that question. And it really depends, because there are so many pluriverses that we inhabit. Even the Western world has so many pluriverses and multiverses. Similar can be said about India. There are so many distinctions in class and caste, income levels, and we all have different understanding of Jugaad and design. I think from what I understand, Jugaad is definitely seen as an exotic practice, because when I offer this position as something that also exists in South America by the name Rastismo, it exists in Kenya, and they use the term Juakali, it is pretty exotic to me even to talk about it. So I can totally see how people see Jugaad as an exotic practice. The academic bubble that I inhabit as my workspace or field of work, they definitely don't see it as an exotic practice or a derogatory practice. It is seen as a very legitimate form of practice, and I think that could be a reason that the sort of the not getting the word there, but the evidence could be that I'm allowed to speak about it in those circles. But I again, I say that it's a very small bubble of design academia in the US, and wherever I speak or wherever I interact with. But it's definitely, I would say, because it's also well known in the business circles, which is not the position I often take, because they are trying to sort of capitalize the whole idea of Jugaad itself. But I would say that it's definitely not seen as a derogatory practice. I rather think it's seen as sort of a sub practice of design, but not as a mainstream practice of design. And that's the position I'm trying to present in the Western context. And this is my first attempt to offer it in design academia in the non-Western context, that it is a very legitimate form of design. It is, and it should be, and it is a shame that it has not enjoyed that position yet. So
Thank you,
I
ma'am.
think that's a discussion. It's like a chicken and egg thing, and it would not end.
Right, that's true. Yes. Okay, thank you, ma'am. We have few questions from our other guests, for our other guests also. Shilpa ma'am and Yammiyawar sir.
Sure.
So Shanu Sharma, our faculty, she asks, question for both the respected professors. We always discuss the responsibility for design educational, we always discuss the responsibility for design educational, responsibility of design educational, but what about the social responsibility of design industry to shape our better future? Maybe Shilpa ma'am or Yammiyawar sir can take the question. Ma'am, I suppose your mic is on.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, ma'am.
But I would like to hear it again.
Sure. We always discuss the responsibility of design education, but what about the social responsibility of design industry to shape our better future?
This is a slightly tricky sort of question to answer. It's not as if designers or studios or those who are in the practice of design are not really. It would be a fallacy to say that that social responsibility does not vest with them, because in the ultimate analysis, design is ultimately about designing for society. That is sort of where one starts from. And there are several examples of designers who are, it's not just that they are engaging in certain kinds of projects in terms of their practice, but also, there is a deeper engagement with, for example, communities, or, for instance, Vikalp Design in Udaipur with Lakshmi Murthy. She's an NID alumna from the 80s. She has worked extensively with local communities in Rajasthan and also in Karnataka, for example, for her doctoral study some time back, where she was working on issues of menstruation and sustainable menstruation. And what does one do with the menstrual debris? There's some 16 tons that is generated in India alone, for instance. That's what she said in her doctoral study. And so she's been working with communities in both these states, also developing sustainable menstruation products, for example. So there is a, it would not be right to say that, because design as a profession intrinsically has a social conscience, and social responsibility is therefore part of it. It's not like the corporate sector where CSR is something that is thrown in as an appendage. So I don't know whether I've satisfactorily sort of answered the question, but
thank you, ma'am. I would request Deepa ma'am to add a bit in this question from the perspective of Jugaad, maybe.
Yeah, I lost connection. So could you please repeat the question?
Sure, ma'am. The question is, we always discuss the responsibility of design education, but what about the social responsibility of design industry to shape our better future?
Yeah. I think because design has such a broad canon of practices, and when we say design industry, I think what the person asking question wants to mean is this mainstream sort of design companies that are using design as their sort of a pillar of work or pillar of production in presenting their artifacts or products to the world. I think design, if you look far enough in the history of design, it was a practice primarily made in service of industry. And so when we as designers are offering our services to industry, we are actually taking in that responsibility ourselves. So budding designers are like you, when you end up in these design companies or the design industry that you speak of, I think it becomes our responsibility there to challenge the system from within to bring about that change. Because if you're saying some manager or a product manager or your boss or a CEO of the company, they only care about profits and numbers and their quarterly figures or whatever. I don't think, unless there's a company big enough that has enough scale, like Nike, for example, that they would care about bringing about change. Because if you look at practices of Nike, they are so large that they can actually talk about sustainability. They can actually launch 1 or 2 products that are made from sustainable recycled old shoes and bring it out to the world. But when we are talking about smaller companies that are just trying to survive, and especially in times like now, it is really difficult for people who are not trained to think like that. So it becomes our responsibility as designers. So we are their social scientists to sort of inform them, to sort of bring in those tweaks and sort of make those practices reflect values of sustainability and ethics and equity.
Thank you, Deepa ma'am.
I think that is all I have to offer at this point.
Thank you, Deepa ma'am.
Yes.
So the next question is also for you. Aman Khaka, one of our faculties, he asks, is Jugaad anti-capitalism? Anti-capitalisms. Oh, God.
Anti-capitalistic?
Listims.
Anti-capitalistic, I think.
Apologies.
I'm sorry.
For the typo.
Yeah, from what I
Okay.
Okay. See, Jugaad is a product of capitalism. If you really look deeply into how Jugaad came to be, when we were sort of freed from this colonization from the British, and you look at that era, what happened was these systems were made in place and were put in place by the British. And we were sort of handed over these systems when we got independence, and sort of decolonization happened to us on papers. But in our minds, we never got decolonized. If you look at what's happening right now, I mean, I'm so much amazed by how many people still comment on my skin color when I'm here and skin color of my kids. So we have really not decolonized our minds yet. And so I think what happened is Jugaad was actually born out of that sort of the subcontext of facing these systems, and we really don't know how to participate in these systems because Indian culture never ever blended with British culture, and the way it was presented and handed over to us, it was really difficult for people to understand what happened. And colonialism is intertwined with imperialism, which is intertwined with capitalisms of what Mr. Aman is speaking of, I guess. And so in the end, if we see Jugaad, in the end, if you just look at the trail of how things have happened, Jugaad is a response to not understanding these systems. The global flow of production that often comes from these Western industrialized nations to our country, and then this whole idea of from what we deal with more digital context, it's also coming from mostly a Silicon Valley culture, if you see. And so I think Jugaad is a response to that global flow of idea. Jugaad is how we have translated our understanding of how we can actually survive. So in this context in which things are thrown at us, we don't really know how to get through with this, but yes, we have this way of sort of surviving. So in a way it is anti-capitalistic, but it has born out of shadows of capitalism.
Okay,
I
ma'am.
think that's my position on that.
Thank you, ma'am. My next question is open to both our guests, Shilpa ma'am and Deepa ma'am. Manisha asks, she would like to know that what are your views on how is creative design helping Jugaad as design in this lockdown and solution for pandemic?
So how is Jugaad offering design solutions in this?
Ma'am, I think we lost your voice. There seems to be some error. Maybe until then, Shilpa ma'am can take up the question. Shilpa ma'am.
I think she's not there. Maybe.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You can just wait.
Sure. We'll wait a while for Deepa ma'am to join back. Okay, ma'am is here. Ma'am, your mic is on mute.
Sorry, I'm having connection issues.
No problem, ma'am.
Could you repeat the question,
Sure.
please?
Please give your views on how is creative design helping Jugaad as design in this lockdown and solution for pandemic?
I think it's a very sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I think that most of us have, from the conversations I had with friends and family, reliance on Jugaad during this pandemic, and many people actually were taking pride in at a very local level, of course, because I don't think any Jugaad or any design activity was officially allowed back there out there to help with the pandemic, because at this point I think in this biologically altered world, I don't know what the implications of Jugaad could be, or But I think if you look at an everyday act of resistance and resilience, it's mostly it's been offered as a mental relief or sort of mindset. Yes, that we would have lack of resources for an unforeseeable future for a couple of months, 3 months, maybe a year, and how are we going to rely on these in the face of this pandemic? And I think a lot of us were resorting to Jugaad-like practices in terms of technology, in terms of how we use because right now we are so limited. I'm sitting in my niece's bedroom giving this presentation because there isn't an official office, and so I think there's a bit of Jugaad happening every now and then everywhere. And in terms of design, I think the design community is still coming to terms, which is also a big failure of this futures community, that we couldn't see it coming. And so I don't think I have a concrete answer on how design and Jugaad are helping save the world, because most probably it's not at the moment, and most probably it is, but it's probably just something we have not been presented with yet, or not been exposed to or acquainted with yet. And on the other side, I think it's a shame if design tries to take sort of how do I put it? If design is trying to take advantage of this situation, it is very selfish of design and design community and designers to sort of, and it would be selfish of me if I start going around and saying that my theory is coming to life, because I think it's just something we are all dealing with at such a personal level and such an intimate level, because it's not just about how we live. Actually, it could be about how we try to live, or how we save ourselves from dying at the moment. And so I don't think there's much Jugaad or design can offer at a very concrete or a very huge level. I think we are really reliant on science and medicine at this point, and so it should be. And so we should always question the limitations of what you can do as a designer. We cannot be be all for anything, even an industry, even in a non-pandemic world. And so it's a very good time to reflect on your limitations and reflect on your own sort of ego or your pride and prejudice as a designer.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your perspective. I'm sure that in the current situation, we all are helpless and we just cannot do anything but reanalyze our list of needs and, so to say, wants. Right. Thank you, ma'am. So this was the last question for our session.
Kavya, can I just add to what
Sure.
Manisha was asking?
Sure, ma'am.
So, Manisha, you are asking about the role of Jugaad in this pandemic. So, if we see the kind of drones that have come, the kind of attachments people have attached to the existing vehicles just to sanitize the entire place, that itself is an example of Jugaad. That nobody thought that through drone somebody is going to use it for fumigation or sanitization of Dharavi. So that is an example where this Jugaad system is arising because of the problem that we have in hand. And if we see the kind of problem that we had in Dharavi, you will find out more and more cases of such Jugaad that actually helped a lot of people at that particular location because of such nature of the problem itself and the limited time to act upon it. So such system arises when you have very novel problem and time constraint scenario, and the problem is critical to solve. So that is what I feel. So Jugaad is always the first step towards the, formalizing the innovation. Yeah.
Thank you, Shanu ma'am, for adding. I'm sure we all can find ample number of examples in our own surroundings as well.
Yes.
Okay, so with this we come to the end of our three-day event, KALPAKRITI DX 2020. This year has surprised us with unprecedented circumstances, but I'm glad that we, as a department, saw the posed challenges as opportunities and were able to bring this exhibition to life with an even wider audience. Wait, Turning challenges into opportunities? Are we talking about designers? Well, yes, I think we are. I would like to thank our guests and viewers for being a part of our special event. The two-year journey of MDes at SP Bhopal has been overwhelming for us in terms of learnings and experiences. Being the pioneer batch, we had our share of challenges and opportunities. Though we were a bit scared at the beginning, but with the support of our faculties, we managed to find a way around hurdles every time. I truly hope that we get an opportunity to pay back to our department. Once again, I thank our esteemed guests and viewers for marking their presence. Moving on, now I would invite our faculty members to present the closing note. Thank you.
Okay, so Professor Sukanto, are you there? Okay. Meanwhile, Sukanto sir set up his camera. Thank you, Pradeep sir. Thank you, Shilpa. Thank you, Deepa. I mean, for joining us on such a short notice, because I actually I called them, and thankfully all of them promptly agreed. And thanks to our students, like for this wonderful show, not just this seminar but also the overall exhibition which is there. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Sukanto sir is there. Maybe he can take over.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us. And it was really at the initial stage. It was we were a little bit scared whether we will be able to organize all the whole thing or not. But successfully we have done it, and we connected many people from different direction, from different thinking style, from different segment of design field as well. Thanks a lot. And I think we will carry this event in next year also, for the next batch, and if possible maybe in between also. Thanks a lot. Thanks again.
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to, thank all our guests, first day, second day, and third day, making it such a great event for our student and for us. So I'm really thankful to all our esteemed guests at the first. I would like to say that. And secondly, the entire design team, all the students, you have worked so hard. And I think in this all 2 years, we were pushing you to just, push you towards the limit and, just discover your best. I just wish from now onwards you will push yourself to do this best. And really, I'm really thankful to all of you and grateful also that you made this happen even without so much happening all over the world. People are so negative. They are feeling so, anxiety is there. But in this entire scenario, you are also facing so many problems at home and with this environment and this situation, but you made it happen. It is definitely because of your hard work that with a very small time that we had, it is possible and you made it. So kudos to that, and very best of luck for the journey ahead. We'll always be there for you, and we are just hoping to see your journey, you know and your growth in the coming future.
Yeah, hi. Thank you to all the speakers, and good luck ahead to all the students. So yeah, that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, faculties. Maybe we can turn on our cameras and take a group photograph. Thank you.
Okay then. Bye.
We'll do it in another link,
I
another
have
meet.
something.
Ankit,
Hello?
wait, Ankit.